Invasi militer Rusia ke Ukraina dikhawatirkan akan memicu dampak yang lebih besar bagi dunia.
President Zelensky's announcement that Western countries have agreed to disconnect Russia from the SWIFT banking system.
Putin's inner circle also feeling the pain of Russia's all-out invasion of Ukraine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sahid. I'm a legal counsel who currently working and practicing law in Jakarta, Indonesia. On today's video, we're gonna talking about the Russians' quote-unquote invasions towards Ukraine. We're gonna discuss it starting from the background that might initially trigger this crisis, the objective that wants to be achieved by each party, and also what are options available in solving this crisis. Of course, we're gonna talk about it on the historical and also legal point of view, only on this first episode of Explain. We start these discussions by talking about the background of each country and what are the possible initial triggers that might initiate this crisis. Actually, Ukraine and Russia is a close relative. If we're talking back to the 9th century, we will know that both of the countries actually came from one ancestor, which is the Kievan Rus people. Together, they were the inhabitants of the northeast of Europe, the geographical place that right now are the territorial of the Russia, Ukraine, and also few of the Eastern Europe countries. From that history, then we came back to the 1900s when finally the Soviet Union is established. Ukraine and also Russia are two of the main republics that were part in the Soviet Union. In fact, in the Cold War era, Ukraine are the forefront of the sub-country in the Soviet Union that could be the main rival of the West, especially the United States. That is because main of the Soviet Union military arsenal actually were stored in Ukraine itself. And then, after the 1991, when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, the Ukraine and Russia are proclaiming its independence. Especially for Ukraine, the independence came at the 24th of August 1991. And from that time, the relationship between those two countries actually is still good. All the harmony between the Ukraine people and also the Russians reached its peaks at the 2000, especially at 2010 when the Russians-backed president of the Ukraine is elected, which is Viktor Yanukovych, in his tenure as the president of the Ukraine. In 2010 until late 2013, he established many of the policy of the Ukraine government that were deemed too pro-Russians, including the acceptance of more than $15 billion bailout from the Russians instead of the EU agreements that might release Ukraine from the financial crisis that it undergoes at that time. Those decisions then initiates a lot of demonstrations between the people, and resulting with the deposement of the former president Viktor Yanukovych out of his office. Ukraine then initiated a democratic elections in which Petro Poroshenko emerged as the victor and became the 5th president of Ukraine, and after that been succeeded by the Volodymyr Zelensky as the current president of Ukraine. In the transitions period between Presidents Yanukovych and Poroshenko, there have been a little bit period of vacuum of power in the Ukraine. That time at 2014 is being used by Russians to annex Crimea, in which also start the modern conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Around that time at 2014, the rebel at the eastern side of Ukraine, which is on the city of Luhansk and Donetsk in the regions of Donbass, also proclaiming its independence from Ukraine. The Ukrainian side believe they are rebels, belligerents, insurgents, but by Russia, quote-unquote, supporting those two rebel independence. Jump back to the 2019 until right now in 2022, the office of presidency in the Ukraine is held by Volodymyr Zelensky, that in fact is also a lawyer that chose an alternative career path, become the comedian before finally hold the office in 2019. In his tenure, President Zelensky stipulated a lot of policies that were deemed anti-Russian. A few of the example of his policy is to initiate discussions for Ukraine to join the EU and also to join NATO. This policy is deemed as the threat of the Russian security interests, and this became one of the reasons why the Russian regime not really fond with Zelensky government. All of this accumulated at the start of last week, when finally President Putin acknowledged the independence proclamations of two rebel cities in the eastern Ukraine, which is the Luhansk and Donetsk in the Donbas regions. With the acknowledgement of these two rebel cities, the Russians then took a portions of the UN Charter that said more or less for the sake of keeping the peace, one country can act militarily to another country. In this case, the Russians take the reasoning to protect the Luhansk and Donetsk people. They then came as the liberator from the dictatorship of the Ukraine governments. Those scheme is called by Putin as the special military operation. So right now, we understood that the main official reasons for Russians to quote-unquote invade Ukraine are to protect the Donetsk and Luhansk people. Meanwhile, in another hand, the Ukraine government believes since 2014 they are an insurgents, a belligerents that need to be annihilated. So they initiate a military policy to apprehend the situation. So in one side, the Russians declared the special military operations in which to protect the people in the Donetsk and Donbas regions, and in another side, Ukraine is only doing what it needs to be done when his country regions undergoes a rebellion state. Then finally, at the end of last week, Russians entering Ukraine and the crisis began. If we see it on another perspective, we could also understand that actually the crisis in Donbas regions, quote unquote, is not the only reason. President Zelensky regime actually tends to be more closer to the west rather than to the east of the Russia. In fact, for some occasion, President Zelensky is also expressing its willingness for Ukraine to join NATO. If this proposition is accepted, this will be a main threat for Russians. Why? Because of the Article 5 of NATO Charter that say, more or less, an attack to one of the NATO nations is an attack to all the NATO nations. And thus, these things many believe were the real reasons why Russia quote-unquote invading Ukraine. And the last thing is, what are the options of another country to contribute themselves in solving this crisis? As we know, until right now, the EU nations is already supporting Ukraine with various aid, including lethal or non-lethal support, or another things that might pressure the Russian side to stop the invasions. Another option is to go through the United Nations, in which been divided also to two main categories. I quote from Professor Hikmahanto Juwana, one of the experts in the international law in here in Indonesia. If country try to go through the Security Council, it will be most likely ineffective, because right now Russia is one of the permanent member of the Security Council, hence reserve the right to veto all the decisions of the Council. In fact, this thing is already happened, as seen in this clip.
Moscow faced down the world on Friday by vetoing a United Nations Security Council resolution deploring the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The veto was a certainty, but China decided to abstain along with India and the United Arab Emirates, a move viewed as a rejection of Putin's diplomacy.
Another option is to go through the General Assembly. This is the more possible solutions, because in this General Assembly there are no veto rights. In fact, all country is deemed as safe. Thus, the resolutions from the General Assembly could be one of the options to apprehend and solve this crisis. And the third and last thing that another country could conduct is to initiate a peaceful talk, a negotiation between country of Ukraine and also Russia to together find the solutions to solve and apprehend this crisis. And that will also be the end of our video this time. We hope justice will prevail and peaceful resolution will become the main solver of this crisis. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I see you next time. Bye.